G'day Internet, welcome back to the shop. I realize that I haven't been uploading as frequently, but it's simply because we've gotten into the stages of things taking A long time, or B, I'm doing things that I've already recorded, and I'm doing it again on the other side, which is just boring. You don't need to see me do the same thing 2 times. But what we're working on right now is that rear rocker section on the driver's side that you saw me cut out with the grinder a couple of episodes ago. So here's that whatever you call this that I cut out. So whatever we put in there, it's going to be better than that. So basically what I'm doing right now, well, let me back up a little bit. I was considering not like deleting the pinch seam and just doing a flat piece that kind of follows one big conform. But I decided against that for a couple of reasons. The vertical supports that go between here and the rest of the car, all of those are gone. Like, that's what they used to be. That's all that's really left of them. And this is one of the approved jack points. So if I ever take this in to get inspected or something, into any shop for any reason, they're going to jack it up right here. And if I don't create some sort of support or reinforcement, it's just going to cave in. And we're not going to do all of this work just to have it cave in again as soon as I try and get it inspected. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this piece, like we're going to not delete the pinch seam basically. We're going to have the inner rocker as its own piece. We're going to have the outer rocker as its own piece. And then in between those two pieces, we're going to have a vertical support that I've already made. I think it's outside by the car right now. But basically we're gonna make 3 pieces of metal and we're gonna weld it all together. So what I'm working on right now is this piece. It's gonna be a little bit interesting trying to make this curve happen. It's not a very aggressive curve, and we are absolutely going to be putting a layer of bondo on the outside. It's gonna be a thin one, as thin as possible, but obviously I don't have like a proper roller tool to make this an actual radius, so we're just going to go bend, 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 bend just a little bit and match it up to this. And then once I'm happy with it, we're going to make this one, and then we're going to weld it all together, and then we're going to make it look nice. And then we can move on to like sort of the final steps before I try and get this thing inspected. The final steps are very fun. They involve putting the RX7 seats in there, and let me talk about those a little bit. I recorded some footage, so I might like interject that into here. I've been jumping around between different things on the project as I always do. But seats. So this is the driver's seat, yes. So basically, I removed the existing bracket back here, and we are going to use the factory brackets. So I wasn't planning on this, but this is what I've decided we're going to do. We're going to not even remove that, and not even remove the one on the other side, because they already meet up with my bolt holes. Let me mention how I knew how much wider to make my extra bolt holes whenever I was making the new floor pan and the crossmember thing that this bolts to. There is an absolute legend online. Let me actually pull up the thread. 7AULL on RX7club.com from back in 2005 is helping me out big time. So I read this thread way before I received the RX8 seats and before I rebuilt the floor. And he said not to quote him on these measurements. Well, I went with them anyway, man. And they worked out. So, which one of these? This diagram. Incredibly helpful. So, this told me how much wider than the existing 2 bolt holes to make the new ones. Because the RX8 seat rails are wider by, I think it's about 1.5 inches. So I went off this guy's measurements, and I used those to pre-create the bolt holes with the nuts behind them in my new seat brackets. So unfortunately, if you are trying to do the same thing, it's not going to be quite as convenient for you because the bolt holes are off by an inch. And what Buddy did in that thread is he welded on a, well, why don't I just show you? The RX7 rails are 15 3/8 apart, and the RX8 ones are 16 7/8 apart. So what he did is he used the existing bolt holes on the floor, because didn't really have much of an option, and then welded these plate, like an adapting plate, onto it. So what I'm doing is going to be lower profile, because that is basically going to bolt directly into the floor using the factory location. However, the rear brackets on the RX8 seats are super weird and absolutely not going to work for me at all. So what I've done, oh, where did I put the bracket? So, it took me a while to remove the rivets that held the previous brackets on, but I got them on both sides. So now this is just like a naked rail that doesn't have any bracket on it. And these holes I'm going to use to bolt this on. So I could weld this onto this, but I'm going to choose not to because I don't want to have to remove the fabric from this or have to worry about shielding it or anything like that. Why not just use bolts? It'll be totally fine. So I made this out of the thickest metal that I got. That's definitely not going to bend, especially under the weight of my skinny ass. So whenever the floor is like all ready to go, we're going to put this seat in there. I already did a bit of a test fit, but we're going to put it in there once I have 2 of these made up. And they are going to line up somehow, and then I'm going to mark where the holes need to go, and then I'm going to make holes, and then I'm going to attach it, and then we're going to... It is the next day. We've been hard at it. Been in and out of the house a million times, slowly iterating on this, getting it to what I want it to look like. And right now, I have it mostly clamped in place. So I'm doing a combination of lap welding and butt welding. So butt welding is whenever you weld with your ass. No, butt welding is whenever you take 2 pieces of metal and you butt them up against one another, such as I have done right here, which means that you don't have really much to fill in terms of filler afterwards. But, so that's looking pretty good. I'm really happy with how that's looking. Like, that's prime. But up here, this is really thin. I think it's really thin from whenever the previous body job was done. It got sanded down. And it's also partially from rust as well. So there's one spot here that's gone, one spot here that's gone. So I was planning on butt welding the entire thing, but I know for a fact, that I'm not going to be able to weld onto something this thin on the side. It's just going to blow through and it's just not going to go well. So what we're going to do is put holes in the car along here, and we're going to do spot welds with the MIG welder. And maybe I'll throw some along the sides where I see that it's thick. Back here, it's nice and thick. I can totally weld to that. But over here, it's sketchily thin. But it's definitely coming together. So far, the only welding I've done is a tiny little tack just to hold these 2 pieces together. I cleaned out on the inside as much as I possibly could because rust. And yeah, so the reason that I have it in here clamped is because this piece needs to get welded in first. This is like a support piece, and it's made out of some 16 gauge, so this is what's going to actually help support the weight of the car. And it's going to go in here in some way. I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it, but you'll see whenever this is done. So yeah, coming along. Nice. Well, gosh diddly darn, I made this piece too short. It doesn't even meet up with my spot weld holes. I should have made this later. Order of operations is like my nemesis on this entire project. Do I unbend it and use the same piece of metal? I might do that. Because this length right here is not really critical. I'm just going to bzz, bzz on both sides. Yeah. Man, that's gonna be a recurring theme. Damn it. I keep like kicking this while I'm working on other things, and that's the second time that I've snapped a perfectly good disc. Whatever, they're not very expensive. Mistakes that I've made. Painting this before I decided to weld underneath it, because, you know, it's bubbling up and making it smell terrible, and I'm probably gonna have to paint it again. Or something like that. So that was a bit of a whoopsie doodle. But some good news, this is probably scorching. Yeah, it's pretty hot. We got some nice stitch welding going on over there and over there. All of those made decent penetration. I also threw some back there, or rather, it was on this side, just to kind of attach it to what was there before. And I know for a fact that this meets up perfectly with our new piece, because it was all clamped together whenever I tacked this in for the first time. So now we can start clamping this in and start welding it in for real. Before I do that, I gotta drill holes in this. So let's do that. Alright, here's where we are a couple hours later. I didn't film any of that, sorry, but turned out pretty alright, if I do say so myself. A lot of these, you can tell that it's a combination of my holes that I made for the spot welds being a little bit too big, which means that I had to put more heat into it, so much heat that it ended up blowing the metal away in a few places. But at least every one of these is connecting in one place, at least. So a couple of them are nice and perfect and flush like that one, and the starting ones, but it gets real thin in the middle from whenever the previous repair was done. I think this was ground down to make it extra thin, and there's some rust on the backside. But anyway, I'm happy with it. The butt welds that we did along here turned out pretty darn nice. These turned out extremely nice, where I was welding new metal to new metal. It's just welding new metal to rust kind of sucks, and new metal to, you know, really thin metal is difficult. But look at this. I'm confident that I could jack the car up on this right now if I wanted to. I'm not going to, but this is definitely going to be sufficient for if anybody jacks this up back here. And hell, I might even do it, because, you know, I'm confident in my engineering. So what we're going to do right now is mix up some bondo. So I took some rust converter and I dripped it inside all of the areas where I couldn't fully clean up all of the rust, including on the inside here. I made sure that there is rust converter in between where this overlap happens, because overlaps just spell for disaster in terms of rust, because it holds moisture there, and this is an area that's going to be getting wet. So behind here there is rust converter, and you can see it seeping out there. So that's all dry, and I cleaned this whole thing with some brake clean, so it is ready for the bondo. This site right here is just the epitome of my life lately. Bondo and dominoes. So at least for a first pass with the filler, went alright. We'll see what spots we left and how much I want to kick myself later for putting too much on, but I think we did okay. I think we covered up all the areas that we need to, and if not, you can always add more bondo. Only have a low to moderate amount of experience with bondo. Don't really know what I'm doing. But I do know that if you continue to mess with it and try and make it better, once it starts hardening, you're absolutely going to make it worse. So I made sure to do a nice big slather right off the bat, and then kind of made sure that I got all the rest of the big goops and awful things that I don't want to have to sand through, like this. Yeah, it's really, yeah, you can tell it's starting to harden. Stuff's interesting, man. Stuff is interesting. So that's going to dry, and we're going to either take a whack at sanding that, or beginning to fabricate the last piece of metal. The piece of metal that needs to bridge this right here and go back there and seal all this up for reals. For sanding this Bondo, I'm going to try and work smarter than harder. So I just made myself this tool, which is, I just really eyeballed this and I just went yoink, 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 yoink with the brake. It's actually surprisingly easy to do. Like, there was nothing precise about this. I just kind of used my eyeballs and bent it and then pulled it back a little bit and then bent it and then pulled it back a little bit. And then you look at it from the side and like, that's a curve. Pretty neat. So this is the curve that we're trying to meet up with. And not bad at all. Not bad at all. So my plan is to wrap some sandpaper around this and use it as kind of a very poor man's linear blocking tool. And just go whoosh, 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 whoosh. Alright, so I forget what the last thing was that I recorded, but we've made much progress. I'm very happy with how smooth this thing is looking and the overall shape of it and how little you can feel that difference. Because this is a place that is like really low priority in terms of bodywork on this thing, but if we're going to do it, we're going to do it at least pretty right. That is my philosophy, at least for this part of the car. So this part is all me. I'm thinking that's looking pretty good, pretty near factory. The fact that I had to bend this right here meant that my curve kind of became flat right at the end, so there's a little bit more filler on the end versus along the rest of it. But it's a thin layer of Bondo versus what it was before. And what it had before was pushed through a whole bunch of rust, which is just not what I want my car to have. So we are moving on to this. So this is how far we are with the remaining big piece of metal that needs to go in here. And after that goes in, then we need to make this end cap here, which is not going to be a very big deal. It's a flat piece that, you know, not very complicated. But you know what is complicated? This might be the most complicated thing I've ever tried to fit in. So we need to adapt to this. So this is how this section is looking. This is me, this is my piece of metal. And it's welded to the original part of the car. This was all rusted out, and I was pretty liberal with my application of seam sealer, and I kind of regret putting as much as I did. Like, down here is good because this isn't going to be welded to directly, and like, I got it inside all of the little micro holes, because, no, they're hardly micro holes, in between my stitch welds, so that this is now like sealed. But I'm going to be welding a little bit on top of this, and I feel like this might be in the way a little bit. I don't know. I don't have a plan yet. So you're going to hear me think out loud for a little bit. So this piece basically goes flat. So this is simple, 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 complicated. Because now, instead of just coming out straight like this, it needs to come down. Like, I don't know how much you can tell on camera how much this dips. It dips a lot. It goes whoop. And the reason that it does that is so that there's room for this bracketry to exist. So, thinking about how I'm going to take this piece. So right now, it's cut out weird to adapt to what pieces of metal on the car exist. See, like that only goes out that far. So it's going to adapt with that. And then I just have this extra, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. And that extra is to bridge this. So I think what I'm going to do is measure this distance right here. Because for right here, like this is basically a 45-degree angle, but this is straight. So what I might do is measure this, and then cut a slit in my piece, and then deal with it in just a small section. Just deal with this, get this cut to shape, bent the way that I want, and then we'll take the remaining metal and, you know, go from there. Because I think this is going to be like an iterative process. I have no idea if this is going to fit anything. Looks interesting though. Alright, it's Friday now. I've gone in and out of the house about 8 billion times iterating on this piece of metal, but I'm doing it in the name of learning and new experience. That's what I'm telling myself. So, this is what we've got ourselves at now. So, I've bent the end part down as its own section, and it meets up pretty nicely. And then this is the difficult as hell part. So I've got a two-step bend kind of going on, and it's gonna kind of be a perpendicular welding arrangement, if you know what I mean. This piece of metal is just gonna meet up, like it's not gonna be flat with this, and I'm just gonna go bzz, 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 and it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. We got proper spot welds over here. We're gonna have proper spot welds along this, proper spot welds along this. And whenever this is all welded in, after that, we are going to cut out a small piece that fits in here. And we're going to weld that in, and then we're nice and sealed. And then we can start painting this. And then once this looks pretty nice, then we can take... we can clean all of the light amount of surface rust that's developed on this since I did it. That's kind of an unfortunate thing, but it's just fact of the matter. Whenever you're a one-man band, things like that tend to happen. Because I wasn't ready to paint it right away. I want to paint this whole thing in one go. So we have some wire wheeling to do. We have some seam sealing to do, and we have some additional welding to do. Like, I have spot welds along this that I did from the top side. But I think I want to also do some welds along the side of the metal as well. Just so that the two pieces aren't shifting around too much and it won't, like, distress the seam sealer and cause leaks over time. I just want it to be all nice and buttoned up, you know? Same thing with here. I want to throw some welds, like, on the side here, even though it's got spot welds in it. And then just, yeah, basically, we're going to go nuts with the welder.
I don't believe much in anything. I've seen enough of the pain and the shame and the blame. It don't amount up to anything. Now I rewind back to a time where I would do anything and pay any price. And I need time, cause I'm starting to think that the promises ain't worth the sacrifice. And there's nothing for me here. There's nothing for me here. Many nights should I walk in my sleep as I dream of how much I wanna run away. I've had enough of the stress and the mess. I can't take anymore, I gotta get away. Now I know why I'm empty inside, and I'm sure I've only got myself to blame. And I don't try to fuel the lies, it's just a waste of time, they'll never be the same. There's nothing for me here. There's nothing for me here. There's nothing for me here. Getting my life and it's fading away. There's nothing
Man, this thing has been with me through some shit. I've had this pretty much since the start of my mechanicking, and it still works. It still works good as new. But I think just now I busted that off. I busted like this huge plastic chunk off. It was cracked here for a while. Still a usable tool.
Neither one play games when swinging for them fences. We want the finer things, the shit that's expensive, the shit that hit them either close range or at a distance. If God's for me, nigga, why bother? I got my game from the top of the food chain, rock bottom, and handle my business when it was my problem.
Would you look at that? This is a very, very pleasing sight to me. This is the result of months of work. It became apparent to me pretty quickly that this would have been way, way better to do if I had a 90-degree or like a swivel attachment on the end of the air hose, because I just have it going straight into the gun, into the bottom, and I need to get the gun like really into these nooks and crannies, and this is in the way, especially because it's a gravity feed gun. It has the hopper on the top, which was just running into this. But I didn't want to go to the store enough that I made it happen. I just kind of sniped it from back here, and also was kind of holding the gun at a 45, which seemed to work pretty well. So yeah, this is very exciting. No doubt this is going to take a couple of days to dry. I'll give it a couple of days to dry, no matter what. We got over here. This is how much I didn't want to figure out how to remove this thing, because I'm going to break the clips on it. I just covered it with a bag and went around it. Look at that. One cohesive floor pan. All sealed from the elements and ready to hold my butt whenever I'm ripping all 100 horsepower of this bad boy. I think that's going to be it for this episode. Oh, one more thing that I want to mention that was kind of funny. While I was painting this, I ran into a bit of a problem, which was, it's really hot in here right now. It's probably like 35 or 40 degrees Celsius, and I've just been dealing with it because it's better for the paint if it's warmer. So, I was wearing gloves, and, you know, your hands get really sweaty when you're wearing gloves, especially whenever it's warm. And my gloves were filling up with sweat. And at one point, I went to I just moved my hand kind of like that, and a whole bunch of sweat dripped out onto the floor pan. So I'm literally putting my my blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. So whenever that happened, all I did is I took a shop towel and I just went and I tried to find all the spots and dabbed them up. Not gonna be a big deal, especially because it's on top of the paint. But yeah, that was kind of funny. Alright, that's gonna be it for this episode. Thank you for watching.